Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're well on this lovely sunny Friday afternoon. My name is Philip Oldfield. I'm head of school here at UNSW Built Environment, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the second Impact at BE Talk Series with Professor Dave Prasad and Ray Thompson. Myself and Dave have just come from a university-wide meeting, a roundtable to look at how we tackle climate change. As we know, one of the greatest challenges of the century we're in. To tackle a wicked problem like that requires multiple government stakeholders, multiple industry partners, non-government organisations, a whole spectrum of communities and society. And really, when we do research in those kind of spaces, it's those levels of engagement and impact that we have the opportunity to look for and to work with. I don't think many people in the built environment do that better than Deo. I think Deo has enormous experience and ability to work with industry, communities and government to make impact, to make change. And I think that's been demonstrated already through the CRC for Low Carbon Living, and more recently through the Decarbonisation Hub in New South Wales. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to CNC Professor Dave.
Thank you, Phil. So my colleague, Ray Thompson, who used to head innovation at CSR, the building products company, he was part of one of the industry partners in our CRC, and we had eventually 65 industry partners that we work with, 6 universities and CSIRO. So CSIRO alone can be as much of a complexity in terms of dealing with as the other 6 universities, but it was all a good experience and exercise in reducing carbon emissions from the built environment. So I'll just briefly take you through what we did, and then Ray will talk about some of the issues from industry side. The first project we will talk about is the CRC for Low Carbon Living. It was about $104 million large project, and as you see, this was one of the finishing celebrations, and some of you may be in there. It had a lot of students, researchers, industry, government, all working together to deliver on big outcomes. And it was in Australia. We have the IRC, the Research Council grants, which are one project at a time. And you can get a lot of one-on-one interactions. But CRC is the biggest bucket of money in supporting research, where you have multiple industry and government partners with the aim of working together to deliver on what you call massive impacts. So it's all about impact and user-driven research that looks at impact. And that's the only reason from where we saw it, why industry would participate, and government, because government's always looking for evidence, better evidence for policy. I think the alphabets there are large enough to read, but we had significant outcomes. We promised at the beginning, and this is something about working with industry and government, you have to have a good alignment and understanding of what you're trying to achieve, what will industry and governments get in terms of outcomes that they can invest in, which is slightly different from just supporting research. Here it's all about what we can do for them that they can commercialize or things like that. We had 3 key goals. We had set out that we would reduce emissions in a big way from the built environment. And the second one was that we would have an economic impact that is significant, and we're talking about $680+ million over that period. And massive capacity building. So we're very clear about what we wanted to be measured against on the other end. And we eventually had PricewaterhouseCoopers measure that independently on behalf of government to see if we did. So with emissions, we aimed for 10 megatons. We achieved 12.5 megatons. And for economic impact, we promised $684 million dollars, which has jobs attached to them and so forth. And we went way over $1 billion in terms of actual economic impact to Australia. And PhDs, we promised 88 PhDs, and we gave 104 scholarships to get that, but we ended up graduating 97 out of the 104 PhDs out of that. So it's really significant. And the 4 people actually bailed out in the first 3 months because they were not the right people for that. So from 100, we graduated 97 over a 7-year period. Plus one, we took an extra year to finish that. So that's actual measured outcomes, and that's what they were looking at. With PhDs, we have had a number go through here in our faculty as well. We have actual products that we mentioned here. We work with a company on home energy analysis forecasting, a company called Solar Analytics. They put in good amounts of money with the base case being that the energy utility was telling us about 52% of solar systems on roofs were not working as well as they should. So we undertook a study to verify that and where the problems were. We then set up a tool that monitors remotely. So there's a company now working in North Sydney with about 50 engineers employed who look at people's roof PVs, and if something is going below prediction, they call them up and say, hey, call your electrician or we can come and fix it for you at a cost. So they make their money out of providing the information and a fee. But there's someone benefiting at the other end. This company has got 50 or so people employed now, trying to monitor and expand it to broader areas. I'll just give you a snapshot of some projects where we work with partners. We work with a Curtin University, one of our partners, and industry partners in Perth, looking at a net zero precinct. So a precinct of about 80 houses designed, planned to be net zero, and they had community scale renewables, community scale storage, but every roof had photovoltaics and storage as well. So the idea that this girl who is standing next to the Virgin Atlantic boss is Gemma, and Gemma came up with the idea that about a peer-to-peer trading platform in blockchain. So what happens is your system gets you to use all your solar from your live PV and storage. If you run short, you buy from community storage. If you buy still short, you can buy from other people who are not at home on the day, their storage. And the last resort is to buy from grid, which is much more carbon than what you would get from the other 3 options. So that became a real commercial outcome. It is now in about 6 countries. It's an export item to 6 different countries, and the project got Virgin Atlantic's big award at one of the international global Davos summits. They give 6 awards, and it won one of the awards for actually solving a real-time problem and having a product that is now employing hundreds of people at the other end, and there's a full company based on that product that's running at the moment. So we also worked on projects. Concrete is very highly carbon intensive process and product, both. Embedded carbon is very high, so we were looking at geopolymer, which is about 1/3 of the carbon content of the normal concrete. So there has been geopolymer products, but we were looking at a particular strand that was particularly useful, as you can see in the picture with the bollards, for a marine environment, for example. Coastal protection is going to be very important in the future as the water level changes and peak events start causing havoc on the coast. So we tried and tested that, and now companies are manufacturing that. But together with it, we developed Australian standard handbook for use of it, because there wasn't a standard, the building code does not call it, and as a result, the developers don't use the material. It was caught in that bind. It's now being also used for roadways, and this particular example in Alexandria that we monitored the degradation tests and all of that to make sure that it's not just a short-term material, it can work. We also looked at large-scale power generation. For a campus like this, how can we bring electricity from a solar farm that we are involved in, which we are doing already now as a result of the work we did near a solar farm near Victorian border. We bring all our electricity offsets from there to offset our electrical demand at the moment. So there were lots of barrier issues, because you can imagine as soon as you take electricity supply out to different buyers, you need intermediaries like Origin. We went with Origin Energy and so forth. There are a lot of players that you need to align. So we got the method and systems right. And now not only UNSW, but many universities and cities like Melbourne and Sydney and so Adelaide, for example, are beginning to do that because we have dealt with the barrier issues. Sometimes dealing with barriers are as important as the product itself, because it opens up doors more easily. We have looked at cooling Western Sydney work that came out of here. Lan and Paul Osman and Matt Santamouris, and these guys were all involved in massive work in terms of modeling, but also developing a tool, and it now helps councils in a planning process and all of those sorts of things. It even helps products. In this case, BlueScope was a partner in the project. They provide the roof, and if you see in the bottom left diagram, there's two roofs which were still white when others were different color, and they were the coolest. They were the ones that most quickly cooled down after a very hot day, extreme temperature day. And as a result, it validated their cool roofs program that they were manufacturing. So they were very happy, and BlueScope was a major partner in the CRC. So you can see I'm drawing a link between partners benefiting and why they get us to do certain types of research at scale. Governments as well. In this case, a project of ours, Josh Berg, who you probably see on Gardening Australia, he led a project as one of our students, PhD students in Perth, on his own net zero house. He validated how it was net zero after 2 years of monitoring data of energy use, temperatures, and all the monitoring that he did, and then supplied information to state governments, and in this case, it's Victorian government that took it on and devised a policy to support developers to do net zero homes. And as a result, that policy had many homes developed under co-funding from the government in Victoria. New South Wales government and a few other governments also use the data and information. It's just proof of concept that it can be done. Net zero is not just an imaginary thing. You can have very little to no energy bill at all, and in many cases they get money back from these people as opposed to paying them money and so forth. We did validation work. Len again did a lot of work in validating the basics program. It had been running for a decade and more, but they hadn't validated whether it was actually delivering outcomes. So the government wanted to know that to support its own policy. And a number of people here who did work on that. Building code, as one of the levers in reducing carbon. Remember, we had massive ambition to reduce carbon while create jobs and so forth. We had this building code before that was simply done one-off changes, and it was difficult to get government to think about net zero. So what we came up with is the idea of a building code change trajectory, where you would know years in advance, like 8-10 years in advance, what the code changes would be like. And when you do that, then industry like CSR can invest in innovation and new products which are high performance, and they know that it will be used because the code is changing. So we came up with that, and now the trajectory for building code for residential buildings already in place, and they're trying to expand it to other types of buildings, and this is already out there, and it had its initiation in our CRC research collaboration rooms a long time ago. This particular one, again from government, New South Wales government came to us and asked us to host a node called Energy Efficiency Decision Making Node. And that simply meant if the state government is looking at an energy related policy or regulation, they come to us and give us the problem. We develop a research project and create the evidence and give it to them, and they decide how to take that evidence into policy and regulations that will affect how we build into the future. So there's a lot of those. We did work internationally through the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, here at a meeting in Dubai around that time. And some of our work has been taken up through the Global Alliance by a number of other countries. Even in specific projects, in this case, in China, we developed a guideline for sustainable cities and communities, which a number of provinces have taken up, and they are using in different ways. And we were at the launch of this in one of the provinces in China. So our work went beyond, but to reach out eventually to look at how people adopt and change, we ran a program again with Josh Byrne and a few people from the Block program, which you're probably familiar with, to do a renovate or rebuild based on sustainability and low carbon ideas. And this ran a we developed the first pilot, and it ran a 6-episode series later that came out of this work to reach out to the larger community in terms of what they should be thinking about when they think renovate or rebuild. So work like this is huge impact. I'll skip through a few fact sheets and policy notes for government and industry and professionals we did. All measured impact out there in terms of their usage. We did guidelines for different types of buildings and developed precincts, etc., which were taken up, and these are already available on our website, Low Carbon Living CRC. You can download it. Still, it's there. But these are guidelines as to how you can design and operate low carbon facilities. We ran national forums with larger communities. Groups like ASPAC, the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, and we ended up with an award, Green Globe Award, for some of the work we did there. You can see Sandy Holloway, who is the deputy chair of the board of the CRC, and Kate, who was the executive director at the department in New South Wales government, who helped us through a lot of this. So I'll stop there. And get ready to say a few things from the industry perspective before I might, if there is time, talk about a few other things.
Thank you, Daya. My name is Ray Thompson. I worked for CSR in building products manufacturing for 46 years. Retired a few years ago. I'm currently still doing a little bit of work, consulting work for a rock wall company in Denmark who needs some help in the Australian market. But I did a science degree here at the University of New South Wales a very long time ago, and then did an economics degree out at Macquarie University. I spent much of my early career in manufacturing, operations management, research in CSR, and I got to work overseas twice, once in Malaysia, once in China. Came back and then moved into marketing and general management. The final career I had within CSR was, as Daya said, I was head of an innovation team looking at all of CSR's areas of interest for 5 or 6 years before I did retire. My overseas experience and this role that I had gave me a tremendous opportunity to travel the world, to see what all countries and companies do all around the world, and to come back and look at then what goes on in the Australian market. I was therefore very pleased when CSR agreed to be one of the sponsors of the CRC for Low Carbon Living, and then even more pleased to be invited to be on the Research Advisory Council to assist in that work. And that's not just a professional but a personal passion of mine in terms of industry cooperation in Australia. What I saw overseas and what I've seen in Europe and North America, in Asia, significant engagement of industry with academia and with government, significant government funding of private companies and large corporations to get things done, to invest and do things. And I have always bemoaned the fact that there was such a small amount of that in Australia. We just aren't that good at it. So I'm extremely pleased to be here today to make another small contribution towards that goal of trying to really significantly improve what we do with industry cooperation and coordination with university research. Just a couple of things on industry to understand it a bit better. I actually define 3 core segments of industry. One is what I call small private researchers and entrepreneurs. I had so many of them, probably one a week, knocking on my door at CSR asking for money because they've got the world's best idea. But they are the ones who often are the ones who get government grants to be able to engage with university researchers to try to develop a new product or system or something. But the biggest problem they have is that they don't do any marketing, they don't have much capital. So they do struggle a bit. Second group is the small private engineering firms or manufacturing firms. Did a lot of work with those in my life around the world and in Australia, and they really are the driving force of innovation. Privately owned, which means that they don't have to ask anybody else about the funding. They don't have to think about the stock market and what the response will be if they decided to invest $1 million in an unknown research or product area. They can just do it. And whilst they have limited capital, they do have some capital to be able to help. And I think they're probably one of the main drivers of industry in terms of development and innovation. The third area is, like my company, CSR, publicly listed corporations. They've got heaps of capital. There was never a problem with funding. That's never been the problem for large corporations. They've got plenty of money to give industry, to give universities to do research. But the problem is that they are publicly listed. They are listed on the stock market. They must make open decisions and transparent decisions, and are open to criticism of throwing money away or wasting shareholders' money by investing in things that don't work. So they're very risk averse, which is not great because they're the ones with all the money. They're the ones you really want to engage with in terms of industry, but they're highly risk averse. And what I found over the years was the only way to overcome that is marketing is the key to all of this. Market research is essential. At the earliest possible stage of any idea or development, you really have to be able to work out whether there's a market need for it, whether there is actual potential market. And that work has to be extensive. In my view, 50% of the funding for a new project should be on the market research, because that's how you then get the capital, because it builds up, it lowers the risk, reduces the unknowns, and give confidence to be able to invest. And then when a large company or a bank or anyone else who's investing significantly to try to upscale an idea is potentially criticised if it doesn't work, then they've got a large body of work behind them to show that it was a reasonable decision to make. So I think that's a really, really key aspect of what has to happen to make it better. And as I say, I saw so many times overseas so much money that goes into private companies from government and other facilities that help to overcome and reduce some of that risk, which we don't have in Australia. CSR, we undertook a fair bit of work in looking at recycled products and how do we do that, and sustainability and products. That we did a lot of work in developing innovative prefabricated systems in both the residential and commercial markets. But probably the main area that we did in cooperation with the CRC was we built CSR House
to understand how the building industry works in a hands-on way, and to work on research and cooperating with CRC and others in terms of energy efficiency, condensation management, mold management, noise management. How do you design and build both materials and the construction to be able to build a much better quality home that is low carbon and delivers those outcomes? So we did a lot of work with the CRC participants on that. Probably the major outcomes of all that is that we get, as Dale said, we've ended up with a lot of new programs, and I'm very excited to see the CSIRO announce their program for the residential existing homes. Dale, that's something I've been only lobbying for 15 years. So I'm very pleased to see that's now finally starting to come to fruition. But building codes, standards, engagement with the government and academia and industry that drives change in the whole industry is one of the major outcomes that we get from the industry cooperation and funding of projects. Not so much in terms of individual products or great outcomes for making a fortune.
One of the areas of constraint that CSR had was many of the opportunities in the building and construction industry for innovation and development were in software, not hardware. If you come up with a nice new product, chances are someone's going to make a copy somewhere in the world, and you're going to get, you're not going to make a lot of money. It's much harder on the software side. But as a really old, very old, 160-year-old manufacturing company in Australia, software development was not one of the core principles that CSR would drive on. So we needed to be able to get a software and hardware combination, and that's one of the areas where we can get greater cooperation in terms of industry and academia. So we found it an extremely valuable exercise in a broader sense, particularly for industry development and industry growth. We've finally got 7-star that looks like it might actually happen now, Daya, coming through, but that's only about 12 years too late. But these are all the things that we work together on, and the network and the ability to be able to drive change in the Australian industry was critical. And one of the issues, just to finish on, in terms of scale, is really a big problem in Australia, because we just don't have the domestic market scale that you need for many of these developments. We really only have two and a half cities, and that's about Australia. And they're 1,000 kilometres apart. So physically, it's really, really hard to make a lot of money in Australia. You've got to have a global market. But what I've seen over the years is to develop a global market, you have to have actually made your product viable in your local market first. That is a little bit harder in Australia. So we have to work harder as industry with government and with academia to be able to overcome some of those barriers and be able to drive and create new market opportunities. So that's all I have to say. Happy to have some questions.
Not just innovation at the micro scale of each projects. You were talking about 65 partners and several projects presented and finalized. I think it's about innovation overall across society and industry. And so I was wondering, what is the role of all these companies involved, 65 industry partners, in terms of synergies? So how do they relate one to each other? How to relate to academia is in terms of networks and the capacity of uplift innovation?
The CRC was in the built environment area. It's this sector. So there's all the partners were with interest in built environment. Some of them were interested in product and material and technology outcomes, and others were in more public good, general information type outcomes that they wanted, including education. So the industry partners, I think, had a lot of synergies on the general side, but as always, when you're looking at product side, there is confidentialities involved. So we demonstrated that and it happens in all CRCs, where you need to be very careful about leak of information and all that, maintaining intellectual property within the partnerships that are subscribing to it or that have paid for it. But public good, we go all the way to make everybody know. So when we talked about these at national forums, we only talked about things at a certain level, but when we talk to the partners, we tell them exactly what's right or wrong with the product and how it can improve. Do you want to add to that?
I'd just like to add to that with the CRC, we can put this down here, I think.
Yeah.
With the CRC, one of the things that they made sure that we didn't have competing industries as sponsors. That would have made it very complicated.
That's very important because when you start stepping on each other's toes about confidentiality and information like that, you have to be very careful.
I imagine 65 industry partners, probably some of them are competing.
Always, yeah, they have competing partners.
But
we didn't
really.
have any, yeah.
Yeah, not really. No, we didn't really compete that much. For example, two of the largest would be CSR and BHP or BlueScope. We don't really compete. We do compete, but they're different products, right? So it's not like there were two brick manufacturers in the CSC. There'd be only one brick manufacturer, which was CSR. So that's the way that it was sort of managed. But there could be a metal manufacturer who is competing with bricks, right? But that's fine.
So the good question, because you need to manage the type of partners you need to make it work. Since the CRC, I've gone on to run a government's Decarbonisation Innovation Hub, and there's about 85 partners there, mostly industry, and same issues, because we are trying to get these industries to take products to market, and you need to be very sure about where intellectual property sits, where ownership lies, who has access, and all of those things kicking. And that's why universities, when we do research, the ethics form that you fill, in many cases you have to be very careful. Most of the research you say, just it's low risk and so forth. But it's just one project that hits the fan, and then you can be in trouble if the information is leaked and someone paid for it and someone else also commercializes. So what you can publish, what you can't publish, all these things are very important.
So sounds like there's a very thin line between success and failure, where something can really turn very quickly into sort of competing.
Yes, that's what I was talking about, risk.
How do you generate synergies instead? That's the big answer.
That's right.
Are there any other questions?
Dale, I just like to share your sort of view on, do we need a subsidy might goes to electronic vehicle? We had the solar panel subsidies, previous government, but I think the motor vehicle is one of the major the source of carbon emission. So I just wonder what your view is subsidize electronic vehicle.
I think it probably come in at different levels.
Yeah.
I know there are many countries, even small Pacific Island countries, where they provide rebates for hybrid cars. So if you get a Prius or something like that, you pay way less duty on that compared to a normal. And they increase the duty on the big cars to offset this loss. So the government is still neutral in its revenue. They just charge the big cars and take away from the small hybrids, which is next step to electric. So it will certainly incentivize. Photovoltaics got a lot of subsidy. Still there are bits and pieces of subsidy. And that's been responsible for really mainstreaming it now. More recently, they've taken it off as much as they can, but it's still, as many people are, there's a viable industry now without the subsidies as much, because people now want it for other reasons. They understand decarbonization. And to the social side, there's been studies done that look at photovoltaics on roofs as a social status thing now. So if you people see you as socially responsible citizen, if they walk past and see that you are doing the right thing by the environment. So there's a lot of other elements have kicked in. And with electric vehicles, it's similar. I mean, people recognize certain cars, Tesla, for example. As soon as people see Tesla, okay, so they know someone who is relatively well-to-do, but also has some social, environmental conscience. But I think the branding of vehicles need to be very clear to capture that element.
I think one of the issues, though, is that the governments, I think in Australia, are just a little bit worried. Our energy supply is on a knife edge. And until we're sure we've got over the hump of reducing the dependence upon coal-fired power and have all the reliable sources of electricity in, I think they're a bit wary about driving massive change in electric vehicles, which will significantly increase demand for electricity. So I think they're playing a game. I don't think they want to subsidise just yet until they get over the hump of the transition to a low carbon electricity generation mode, and that's going to be a bit of a challenge for them, because the one overriding principle for politicians is no blackouts. If you have a blackout, you're dead.
If Australia had a car industry, really good car industry, things might have been different. If we say produce electric vehicles, we might use that as a way of also getting people to buy local technology, but it is slightly indifferent to that at the moment.
And now the New South Wales government, including basics and levels, they are going to include embodied carbon assessment into rating systems or regulation. What opportunity do you see from product supplier perspective?
We looked, I spent some time looking at the whole embodied carbon issue. It's so complicated, I wouldn't recommend it. It's just too complicated, because how far do you go? I mean, the whole discussion is about, what supply chain is included in your embodied energy. If you're saying that you've got to work out and have clearly identified energy supply chains from all over the world, which is what most manufacturers have as supplier, product supply, raw material supply, it's too complicated and you don't trust the data. So I'm against having embodied energy in the formulas because I think it's open to a massive rorting, and you'll have good companies who will do all the right thing and say, oh look, we're really, really good here. Let's say it's a chair. Let's say it's a chair, right? And an Australian manufacturer is manufacturing chairs, and he says, this is my embodied energy for my chair, and I'm being honest, and that's what it all is. Somebody else comes in and says, well, I've got the identical chair, but my embodied energy is half of that. It's too hard to verify. So I think it's fraught with danger to have an embodied energy story in there for products, and I think it would disadvantage Australian manufacturers. I think the greatest opportunity is my company owns CSR, owns half of Tomago aluminium smelter. So being able to convert that to 100% renewable energy for aluminium production, that's an enormous opportunity. The same for all products. For product manufacturers, if we're able in Australia to get this conversion to really, really low carbon base, particularly of energy supply in Australia, and you're then able to market a product which is genuinely manufactured with low energy carbon input, that's more verifiable and very marketable overseas. So I think, you just have to be a bit careful with this.
CRC for low carbon even had a huge success. What would you like to tell academics in terms of collaboration between academic research and industry, like in particular how to apply scientific research in the real world to resolve real world problems?
Yeah, research centers like the CRC, they always produce practical end user targeted knowledge or knowledge translation. And even this year we completed a net zero carbon 2030 guideline. We worked together on those. These were funded by post CRC. Same CRC had leftover money which funded some of these things. And there's so much good knowledge and information that comes out that students in particular, but professions, they really benefit from it. I think now we are seeing, because we are getting asked to produce training material for architects, for example, the training school idea. Yesterday I had a conversation with Louise from the university, who is trying to do a course training thing in net zero carbon for architects. And people have taken from your high performance architecture website some of our talks we gave, public talks, and made training programs out of it and selling it to architects now. And so there's a lot of flow through. I think if we just captured and made available to the right people a lot of these, from students to practitioners, that will assist a lot in making that change possible quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
think, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Reverend and Dale, for coming today.
Thank you.